Hey everybody. I am coming to each of you with a request that you might be able to help me out with a project that I think is going to be a way that Brian has a lifeline to get through the next 4 months of chemo. So if you bear with me, I'll explain to you what this project is. And then you can make a decision of whether or not you want to jump in and help me with it to support Brian through these next months that he has ahead. So first, let me just start by telling you how this kind of, this idea was birthed. Some time back, a friend of mine actually from the Sunrise Rotary Club that I belong to, that bumped into it at church one day. Tony saw, his name's Tony, he saw Brian and I coming into church and told Brian that he had a book for him that he really wanted to give him. And Tony found him after church and gave him this book called The Sender. And we've been getting lots and lots of books since Brian has been diagnosed with cancer. Both of us have been getting books. And both of us had about 4 or 5 that we have been reading since back in October when all this started, kind of keeping them all going at the same time. And I started noticing that Brian would get lost in this one and stay with it for quite a while. And every now and then he would maybe reach over while he was reading it at night in bed and say, listen to what this says, or read this paragraph right here. It's got some really good stuff in it. And I agreed, it did. This book is about, y'all are all men, so you probably know who Chuck Pagano is. I probably just said his name wrong. Head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. He was diagnosed with cancer back in 2012. And while he was going through his cancer treatment, which he had to do actually in the hospital for 3 months straight, he began receiving letters that were signed just simply The Sender. And these letters were actually being written by a friend of his, which he didn't know that this was his friend. He had some speculations, but Kevin Elko is a consultant for football teams, Fortune 500 companies, as an inspirational speaker and motivator. And he was the one who was behind these letters, sending them every day. Literally every day, he wrote and mailed a letter while he was getting through his cancer treatment. And a lot of the letters are included in this book, many of which that Brian just felt extremely inspirational. He even reminds himself of some of the things and says them out loud. I do as well. And so I began thinking, he finished the book, he loved the book, and I'm actually in the middle of it myself. I haven't even completed it. But I began thinking about how powerful this book was and how powerful it was for this guy who the sender calls him Charlie, how powerful it was for Charlie to be able to get through his cancer journey. And that got me thinking about how many of his dear friends that we have, how many people will ask us all the time, please let me know if there's anything I can do. That kind of is a pretty common thing that people will say to us, let me know if there's anything that I can do. And that's a hard question to answer because, to be honest, half the time we don't know what we need. We can barely think of what we might even, how we'd respond to that. And sometimes when I'm being really cynical, I'll say something snarky in my head like, well, if you can cure cancer, that's about the only thing I care about. Or what we really want is to get off of this journey as quickly as possible. If you can't do that, there's really nothing I need from you. And so my snarkiness is there sometimes. I admit I'm human. But also we tell people all the time, just please keep praying, please keep coming around, keep inspiring, keep motivating. I think that's been the thing that's been the most powerful for Brian is the level of support, just outpouring support that he has gotten through this process. And it's made a world of difference, because if people were burying their head in the sand, afraid to have conversations, afraid to come and visit, simply because they don't know what to say, which that's natural sometimes. If everybody was doing that, he wouldn't have this level of support. And so many people are leaning in and wanting to do anything and everything they can to show their love and support of Brian. Each and every time he gets hit, and he's been hit so many times. And as y'all know, most recently, he's been hit with this recent lung infection, which now he's going to have to overcome that obstacle while trying to go through the next 4 months of chemo, which is only going to continue to get harder and harder on his body. He had a really low moment, actually this past weekend when I was on the 8th grade graduation trip with James. He called me on a Saturday in just a really low place, and completely took me by surprise, because he made a comment saying that even if the chemo is working, because at this point we have not had a scan yet, we were waiting the scan to know if the chemo was going to work. But he said, even if the chemo is working, I don't know if I can face another 4 months of this. And I froze. I didn't even know how to respond to it at first, because the only thing that went through my head is that can't be the answer. There's no quitting. But I let him talk it out, and he began to express to me just the level of fatigue, how he never anticipated how hard this was going to be on his body, how hard it was going to be on him spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and the thought of enduring another 4 months of this was just something, at the place he was in right there in that moment, was something he couldn't wrap his head around. So we talked it for a while, let him just kind of process. And at that moment, the only thing I knew to do is just to ask that we prayed together, which one of the things that I prayed for in that moment was that he will continue to feel wisdom and courage from God and from others, that during this process, no matter how hard it is, whatever he faces, that courage and wisdom sets in from every angle and all components of every person that's in his life, God, Holy Spirit, friends and family, that he will still get up. No matter what, he will have the ability to get up no matter how hard he gets knocked down. And we prayed for that, and I told him that no one has ever said that he has to be strong all the time, that it's okay to feel weak, that feeling weak and having your days where you feel weak does not make you a weak man. And those of you that know Brian know that to be true. But that was our prayer. And I went and had my own meditation time to kind of think about that. So that's been in my head now, for a while. And then I've started reading this book and thinking about the impact it had on him, which leads me now to tell you what I need from you, and what this project is. As y'all, and those of y'all that know me, those of you that maybe follow on my Caring Bridge post when I write about Brian's journey, Brian, of course, will say things that my words have been able to inspire him and motivate him, and he appreciates them, and I know that. But at the same time, it's coming from his spouse, and it's coming from a woman's perspective. And men and women, they're just different. They see and experience words and experiences. Advice comes differently. It lands on you a little bit differently, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. If anything, this is why this project has kind of popped in my head, because what's going to be important here is that these words of encouragement are going to be coming from you, men. Men that are faithful to the Lord, faithful to their families, to their spouses, their children, that they have a zest for life and what they put in life, whatever it is in your life, and the love that you have for it. Something, it motivates you every day to wake up and be a part of it. And each and every one of you has had your own trial, tribulation, struggle, pain that you've had in your life. We've all had those things. Some of us keep them a little closer to the cuff. We don't talk or speak on them, but we've all experienced them. And there's something, I think, beautifully intimate about one individual sharing with another individual their pain. And to be able to not only share that pain and that experience, but the journey that they went through and what they learned on that journey. Because we all go through things, but it's how we come out on the other side that's really important. And so I began thinking what this would look like for Brian to get through his chemo for the next 4 months, to where every single day he received a letter with pearls of wisdom. And I started thinking, that's 4 months. Okay, so I need 120 letters. That's a lot of letters. But this is a good opportunity to where Brian is going to be able to hear from a variety of different perspectives, different experiences, different stories, and all that wisdom. I mean, that wisdom, coming from a man's open heart. And I think that's the key here, is that I'm not looking for a hurrah little note, a little 5-sentence paragraph that's like, I'm with you, brother, keep fighting the fight. But truly opening up yourself and kind of exposing your heart a little bit on paper, which means you're going to be doing a little, maybe kind of thinking through some of your own experiences, and maybe you haven't reflected on some of those before. Maybe this is also kind of a good opportunity for you, because I'm going to be asking you to put it on paper but not have to sign your name. This is going to be done anonymously with a signature that's going to be the same each and every time. So if you are kind of already like, I'm out, I'm not doing that, because I'm not about to expose myself and all of my past and etc. Not asking you to have to do that. For those of you that are really close to Brian might already know some of the stuff that you write about, and that's okay. I mean, this isn't like, the goal isn't to try to keep it to where Brian doesn't know who each and every person is. That's not the goal, but the main goal is for Brian to read something and have a moment every day, because every day is literally a battle. But to have a moment every day to remind himself that men just like you have struggled, felt pain, felt disappointment, have been knocked down, have seen there is not a way, and been able to figure out how you could persevere, how you could get through it, how you got back up. And that's what I'm looking for. I want to know about the how, and I want you to be able to share that with Brian. So each and every day, he has a glimmer of hope that he can do this, no matter how hard it is, that he can do this. And there was something that I began thinking about, in that a lot of you, I've heard people say this to Brian, is that we're behind you, man. You got an army behind you. You've got prayer warriors behind you. We're battling this together. You aren't alone. And that's what I want him to experience. I want him to experience that each and every one of you are one of his warriors, and that you're standing with him, and that you have felt pain, that you have felt some of these things that maybe not be the exact same of what Brian's experiencing, but you've had that hurt, you've had that moment where you didn't know if you're going to get back up. but you found a way that you did. I read something that said something about the spiritual warrior. The spiritual warrior always has a crack in his heart where wisdom can come out and the mysteries can reveal themselves. And I think that's the key component, is that you have to have a crack in your heart to be able to expose yourself a little bit, to talk about some of the painful experiences. But I'm more interested in the rising from that and what you could do with it, because I know that's what's going to get Brian through this. And so I do, if you'll bear with me, kind of give you an example a little bit about what I'm looking for here. So this is like, for those of you who don't see me wearing my glasses, I do wear readers because I started noticing my eyes don't work as well. This is one of the letters that was sent to Charlie while he was in the hospital, and it kind of gives you an idea, I guess, of what I'm looking for. So that way, if you put your own letter together, you'll have a gist for it. So bear with me. What is the position of health? It's about not forcing it to happen. It's about sitting in a position and letting it come. You might call it prayer. I pray about the problem. I pray about the solution. It's about pausing your thoughts. Here you go, dog. This is it. Living in your vision and not living in your circumstances. That's the position you've got to take. It's about quiet walks with your wife. It's about getting your body in rhythm. My grandmother used to always sing a song. I come to the garden alone when the dew is still on the roses. He walks with me and he talks with me. I wake up every morning, Charlie, and I take that position. I look at the ceiling every morning and I say, God has a plan for me. God is here, Charlie. He has a plan for you. Just keep saying that over and over every morning while you lie in bed. So that was one of his letters, and to kind of give you a taste. And this is a part of the last letter that he sent. I've tried to share so many things with you, Charlie, over these last months. I've given you mantras, homework, stories, advice. You have to choose to do them. You won't feel like doing them. You have to choose to do them. We've learned together about winning on 3 levels: the spiritual, the physical, the relational. You have to choose to do that. You may feel like being bitter, but you have to choose to be better. You may feel like giving up, but you have to choose to fight when you're weary. You may not feel like being kind, but you have to choose to be a blessing. I'm strong if you're strong. These are the things that we choose. You want to know the best speech I've ever read? It was when Moses spoke to the Israelites before they went into the promised land. It was the very last speech. Placed in front of you is life and death. Choose life. Bam. I don't know where you are right now, Charlie, but this is Moses' final speech placed right in front of you right now. Choose life or death. Placed in front of you is love or darkness every day. Choose love. Placed in front of you every day, Charlie, is faith and fear. And the last line he put was choose faith. So what I'm asking of each of you is to help me give Brian something that he could read every day that reminds him to choose faith. That's what I'm looking for. It can be your stories. It could be something you've experienced. It could be something that your grandfather or your grandmother taught you that you've carried on in your life and that you used at one moment in your life where you felt low and couldn't get back up. I'm not necessarily trying to tell you exactly what to write, but that's kind of the gist of what I'm hoping you'll come up with. So kind of the parameters, I guess, if you will, of what I'm looking for. And then so those of you that know me are going to completely laugh that I even did this, but this is so we can be clear and there aren't any misunderstandings about what I'm trying to achieve here in my project. So I'm looking for each of you to write a letter to Brian. And in that letter, I'm looking for the following things. I'm looking for it to be heartfelt. It's got to come from your heart. It's got to be authentic. It's going to probably require you to be vulnerable. I'm looking for words of encouragement through your own stories, your own trials, your own tribulations, your own struggles, your own pain, your own despair. I'm more interested though than that part of the story. I want you to share your rising, how you rose above those circumstances, and what you learned in that journey, because that might be something that Brian is going to be able to take away from your story. You can include a prayer, maybe it's a scripture, maybe it's how you took that scripture and applied it to your life or that situation. It's to be inspirational and to have a warrior spirit to carry him through treatment. And that's what I'm looking for. Again, it's going to be anonymous. That's part of my parameter. I want it to be anonymous. So always anonymous and always signed, your warrior. My goal in the very last letter that Brian gets will be for it to be signed, your warrior, as in you are a warrior. Little play on words. And they're all going to be mailed to Brian Boudet, but not our address. Not our address. They're going to go to our next door neighbor's address. This is the address that I want it to go to. You can address it as Brian Boudet. Do not put your return address. Just put the return address on the back of the envelope as the same address. That's a little trick. So that way, if it does get lost in the mail, it's still going to go to the same spot. And our friend Mackie has been kind enough to collect these letters each and every day, so that I can hand Brian one every day. That's the goal, is for Brian to have a letter every day. So I'm just holding this up because some of you are sitting here still listening and you haven't grabbed a pen or a piece of paper yet to write down this address. So this is where the letters are going. I am putting this out to the masses because I need 120 letters, but it would be pretty fantastic if I got more than that. So if your dad or your uncle or a friend, or, it's maybe somebody that doesn't know Brian that well, that has these pearls of wisdom, I think that they would, that they would enjoy doing the project like this. Pass this on to them. And the more letters I get, the better. Each of you all know how much I love my husband. He's my world. And I want to do everything I can for him to feel the power of love that's around him, and that goes well beyond what I could just give him solely. And I know that if you're willing to help me with this project, it's a beautiful way to help your friend, to pay it forward, and from thinking of times that someone else has helped you. And ultimately, it might end up being what helps him get through the day. Because that could be just the day where he says, I can't do this anymore. So thank you for everybody who is willing to do this project with me. Love y'all.